and welcome back to the delusional diaries of a girl who thinks that she can make a whole new wardrobe before she goes to Europe next week, even though she hasn't sewn for most of this year. If you couldn't tell by my lack of sewing videos this year, the sojo has been non-existent, but she's kicking back in right before I go away, and now I have all this energy and excitement to create new clothes, and I want to take it all away with me. I've got a massive pile of things I want to create, so with all of that in mind, I thought that I would start somewhere very basic today to kickstart my sewing journey again. Hopefully then that helps the flow for the rest of the things that I want to make. I have these scrap pieces from a two-piece set that I made almost like beginning of last year. Oh my god, I can't think about time. They're very awkward, very small. They are a stretch knit in organic cotton. Such a beautiful material, but I guess because of that form and stretchiness, it is limited to what I can make with it. So to go with the two-piece set, I find that I can only wear the jumper piece with the dress. It's just really hard to style otherwise. So if I make a little crop top out of this, then that can open up the ability to be able to style it with pants and skirts and whatnot. So that's what we're gonna do. I'm working with what I have. If you also want to follow along, this is what you'll need. Fabric chalk, a measuring tape, some elastic. I guess this is like 1 centimeter wide, and then enough to go around your full bust. Some nice stretch fabric. You'll need enough to go entirely around your bust and also the desired length. For this, I'm going to also be experimenting with some lining. Ideally, both of the materials should be stretchy. This one is a lycra, so it's incredibly stretchy, and this one is a organic cotton, which is less stretchy. So we'll see how these pair together. Again, I was just using what I had laying around. Otherwise, maybe opt for similar materials. Then as per usual, some pins, fabric scissors, and some matching thread. First up, I need to add an extra step in for myself, which is patchworking these two pieces together to get it to a height that will actually cover my bust area. So I'm just gonna lay these pieces good sides facing, sew along there, and then I can start measuring, cutting the bust area out. Yeah, okay. Ready? Okay. No, oh no, we do need that. I sewed that line. I initially did a zigzag stitch, but for some reason I feel like it just didn't feel very secure. So I ended up just doing a regular straight stitch on a bit of a looser tension and a like high to mid-range length, and it seemed to work, and I feel like that feels nicer, it looks nicer, and that's generally a lot of the time why I give pretty vague advice, just because your machine and your thread and your fabric is always probably going to be different to maybe what I'm using. I definitely recommend, especially if you're using stretch stuff or something out of the ordinary, to experiment and just get your machine set up to what feels and looks good for you, even if that goes against the advice that maybe you're tuning into. So yeah, listen to people, take the advice obviously that you find, but it's also okay if you end up finding something that works better for you. It would normally be recommended to use a zigzag stitch on a stretch, which I get because you want it to expand, but if this was like a lycra or something more stretchier, it would work better. Anyway, that's just me over explaining the same thing. Okay, so I've got the longer section now. Key measurements I'm going to find is my bust area. If you have a different wider point that you are covering from your chest down to wherever you want it to finish, measure that area. Once I get that bust measurement, I'll divide that by 2, and that will be the width of 1. I'm tossing up whether I add seam allowance or not, just because it's stretchy. I'm gonna add 1 inch just to be safe. Overall, I want it to be a nice, snug, tight fit, so I probably will end up stretching out, but always better to have more and be able to cut it off than not have enough. And then the second measurement is the height, which is from my mid chest down to where I want it to finish. Again, adding 1 inch of seam allowance, but I am limited to what I have available. So in an ideal world, I would add 1 inch or 2 centimeters or whatever the conversion is. Cool, I think that's the 2 measurements I need. And then I'm gonna cut out a front panel and a back panel to those measurements. I'm gonna experiment with adding some lining into it. So I'll also cut out 2 panels in lining at the same measurement. The lining that I just had laying around actually is like a lycra, super stretchy material. So I'm gonna see how my machine goes with it. Fingers crossed it works and they all blend well together. I don't wanna do a seamless look to the top edge, and I feel like having this will help. Otherwise, if this doesn't work, I can always use some scraps, but I don't really have many scraps. This piece needs to be much larger, but I'm just gonna make do with what we have here and then add some extra onto the other side. Making up for the extra. The only thing I need to be concerned about this is like where I just cut along that seam area, it could end up unraveling. Luckily when I do sew the new seam, it should hold it in place, but if I'm ever worried, I'd just go back and stitch along there, back on the underside of the seam. I'm gonna get ahead of myself and sew up the seams. So I have these currently laid good sides facing. As you can tell, the edges are offset if they're flat. I'm gonna match one of these raw edges, sew up the side seam, and then I'll just shift it all over and match the other raw edge. And then I'm gonna do a sneaky try on and just make sure this is the dimensions that I want. And that can help me determine how much lining I need to cut out. Just because sometimes with measuring your body and then using stretch material, the way that this sits on your body is probably a different measurement than what you just like statically measure it. That's what I find anyway. I've just been conscious of that. Again, I'm just gonna keep it as a regular stitch for this material. If it needs changing, I can go back and do that. Probably will need to change it for the other one, but we'll see how we go. This is what I love about an unintentional mistake slash win. This little line is that extra panel I added on, and that's how I was holding it up to me. I'm like, I actually really like that on the front. Imagine if I had done it like one of those cute curved ones, but that would have been really fun. Anyway, okay, we're doing a quick turnaround. I just want it to be straight. Did I try it on? No. Let's see how she looks. Cute. I will end up adding elastic to this top section, so that will help like bring it in. I do think it needs to come in a little bit. So my initial thought is correct. You don't need to add seam allowance if you're using stretchy material, just for this simple straight thing, because that's what it would like sit like normally. That's so cute, the line there. Okay. I'm gonna take that in by about probably a good chunk, hey? Because the thing about stretch material is it stretches out over time, so I'd rather it be tight to begin with. I'm gonna just go for it and do an inch. I think I am gonna do a bit of a curve. Work with the body. This is where I need to commit to the top and the bottom. So I'm gonna start off only taking about like 1 centimeter or half an inch from the top, go into about 1 inch to 2 centimeters in the center, and then back out to 1 centimeter and half an inch on the bottom. Then I can use this as a template to then cut out my lining pieces, and this just helps reduce waste. You know, if you try and perfect this, now I don't need to like cut bits off of the lining and like adjust it how I am to this. The beauty of self-drafting. Let me draw it so you can see what I mean. Again, I'm not measuring, I'm just going to free flow it. Roughly, there's my existing line, move in by like about 1 centimeter. In here, I want to go in by like 2 centimeters. Good getting this form fitting, because then at least I don't need to rely on the elastic up here to really hold it. It's more so just going to help it like a little bit cinch in here and look a little bit nicer, but we don't need it. So normally I would have the seams perfectly to the edge, but as I mentioned, one side is bigger than the other. I'm roughly laying it where I guess that like fold of the halfway point is. As you can see, it's got a nice little curve, and then I'm just going to draw it out and then cut it. I'll put like a slight seam allowance. I'm going to need to experiment with the lining, because hopefully it'll be double-sided now. Like, how cool will that be? Cut it to about as halfway as possible, and then do the old fold over trick and try and make it nice and symmetrical. Definitely keep the stretch the same way, face it good side facing down. good sides facing, so down the side. Normally I would switch the thread to be like a black, but this is all gonna get hidden and hopefully we don't see it on the other side. Thoughts and prayers for the zigzag stitch. Quickly try it on. Success. I love it. Every time I try this on, my hair just gets crazier and crazier. If you couldn't tell, I have not made this before, so it is very much trial and error process. So what I think I'm gonna do next, I want this good side facing out. Then I want this to be inside out. So then when I slip it over the top, match up the top edges, the lining and the main outer piece will be good sides facing. Incredible. Okay, the vision is coming together. I'll show you a close-up actually. But I'm just going to sew one line entirely around this top section just so it joins it so that I don't have to worry about it shifting. And then I'm gonna add some elastic in there. So let me show you. I'll sew the line and then we'll add the elastic. So I've lined up the two seam edges. So at least I can start there. If you're into doing things properly, you might want to pin a few key places out and make sure that as you go along that they're all matching, and then you can stretch it out to even it out. I'm going to offset this about 1 centimeter from the top. Sew this line, and I'm just going to do in a straight stitch just because my machine has been okay with that so far. I've got a looser tension. I've got it set on 3 straight, and I'm just going to try see if this likes this. So at least if I leave that 1 centimeter gap there, I've got space to then add the elastic in. Might give it a little stretch as I go when I sew. See how we go. Worst comes to worst, I can come back and do a zigzag. I'm definitely going to zigzag stitch when I add the elastic on. That was a success. So I'm gonna grab my elastic and I'm going to lay this on top of the seam allowance section and then just switch my machine to a zigzag stitch and stretch it out a little bit as I go and just essentially sew this onto that area. I have just got my full length of elastic and I'm just gonna start there, go the whole way around and stretch it as I go and then just trim it once I get to the end. Again, I find that just reduces the waste because you might cut it to a certain length and then you end up stretching it out and then not needing as much. So if you would like to pre-cut it, you can just wrap it around you, get it to a nice tightness that you want, pin it in the certain places so that it equally fits across there. As I mentioned, this isn't the whole thing holding it in place, so it doesn't need to be extremely tight, but I'm just going to give it a slight pull so it has that little bit of stretch and it just keeps it nice and firm up there. I find if you stretch it too much, it will give it that like gathered bunched up effect, which personally I'm not going for with this. So that's my little tip. For this, I do want the zigzag width to be probably at its largest, just so it covers more area of the elastic and therefore keeps it nice and secure in place. I kind of just align the edge of this elastic to that seam line that I've sewn. Stretch it out a little bit, honestly not much. What's going on? I think I'm out of thread. Classic. Take 2. I was out of thread. Bobbin strikes again. Final stretch. Literally. Oh my god. That's so embarrassing. Pretty much overlapped kind of where I was beginning. It might not be the prettiest look, but it will end up getting hidden away, so that's why it doesn't bother me. Here goes the final reveal. That goes like that. The lining ends up getting pushed underneath. Then hopefully, there's a nice clean top edge. It's very bunched up and puffy up the top. So one solution to this is I'm gonna pull it like this. So they're kind of separate now. Lining one side, good material on the other side. And that seam that we have sewn the elastic, I'm going to push it towards the lining side. So I will switch my thread to a black thread just so it blends into the black material. Probably do a very mild zigzag, not as hectic as my other one. So I will change the width to about mid, just a sewing line that's gonna help hold it in place. Sweet, jump on the machine. This is just where I'm gonna have to try and make it nice and flat as I go. If I flip that good side out, now I can see where I'm stitching. Switch over the thread. Black, probably not gonna be enough. That's better. So obviously need to make sure at this point that the elastic seam allowance is actually pulling towards this side. And then I'm not sure if you can probably see that, but you can tell that that is sitting so much flatter in comparison to this black bit that is like wanting to stick up. So good, doing what I want it to. Rare. How cute! My hair ended up coming out as I was putting it on because she's a bit snug, but that's the purpose. We want it to be nice and form-fitting. I love how it's turned out. This was the whole goal, like there's no sewing line up here because we did all that understitching seamless style. For the bottom section, I just kind of like rolled it up just to experiment, and I really like how it curves down and then comes up. So I might try and achieve that for the bottom, but with my dress that I made for the initial combo, I ended up just trimming it and leaving it raw, and I really liked that look, and I think I'm just going to go for that simple finish for here just because knitted material, it's not going to fray. I find with the knitted stretchy material as well, if I try and do like a double rolled hem, it just kind of looks a bit bunched up and I might ruin it. Only thing is obviously I've got the lining in here now, so I might even do a stitch in the ditch, which means that I just do a stitch the entire way, or even in segments. I could just do a top and bottom, or the entire way down a line that essentially I try and hide in the ditch of the seam, and it will conjoin the lining and the outer material. The only thing with that is I probably am going to ruin the underside just because it's hard to get a thread that matches both of these. I would prioritize a thread that matches the outer material so I don't really see it, and that will just help hold it in place so that like if I have the raw edges down here and this bit here, it's not kind of like bunching up and moving around. It kind of like secures them together. And if I do the raw cut finish, I'll probably cut the lining just a little bit shorter so it never accidentally like peeks out. Yeah, that's my plan. Raw cut for now. I'll probably raw cut it and keep it just a little bit longer, so if I ever do decide to want to do a rolled hem or a bias binding or another finishing type, I can always do that. How much length? I actually have quite a bit of length, so because it probably will always be tucked into something. Anyway, worst comes to worst, leave it like this, wear it like this. If I change my mind, I'll do that. Well, that was item 1 of the I don't even know how many things I want to get done over the next few days before I go away. So you might see me sporting this around in Europe with many more layers because it's going to be cold. But yeah, if you ended up using this as inspiration to create your own, don't forget to tag me at the Essentials Club on Instagram or TikTok or wherever you find me. I do always genuinely love seeing your outcomes. It's so exciting. Just, I don't know, seeing you guys recreate stuff and knowing that you're enjoying it. I mean, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, let me know. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe, comment somewhere, DM me on Instagram. I'm going to stop rambling. I hope you have a lovely day wherever you are, and I'll see you guys in the upcoming videos. Bye.